No, 100%. And Real Madrid, as much as, we've just won the league and we've established ourselves again as one of the pinnacle teams in Europe, Real Madrid are always going to have that pull. They're just one of those teams that it doesn't matter the situation, what the circumstances are, they're always going to have that pull. And I mean, contracts as well. Suarez signed a new contract December of 2013. He left the following summer. Anything can happen in football, but it's important to have contingencies. And that leads us on to the next topic, which is Nico Schlotterbeck. Now, Schlotterbeck is one of those defenders that I think has been getting linked to Liverpool for a good few years now. He was last summer. I did a video on it. There was discussions on Anfield Index all over the place about Nico Schlotterbeck. And there's a myriad of reports who are coming out and saying that Liverpool have apparently held discussions with Nico Schlotterbeck. Liverpool are holding talks regarding the signing of Borussia Dortmund defender Nico Schlotterbeck. The debate continues to swirl around the need for defensive reinforcement following Giovanni Leone's ACL injury. Liverpool's recruitment team are continuing to do their due diligence on potential alternatives to Mark Gahey. Now, that's a big, big thing there, is the potential alternative statement, because we'll touch on Schlotterbeck shortly, but the fact that we almost got Gahey done on deadline day, which we left a little bit too late if we're sort of being realistic. Now we're looking at the alternatives because there's a worry that he may not join. What's sort of going on in the mindset there to think that even though we agreed everything with Gahey and it wasn't us that pulled out of discussions, it was Palace. What's going on that's making the club think we may still not be able to sign him going forward?
I mean, I'm a little kind of thinking about stories like that. I guess it's an interesting one because with the Gahey stuff, you can never guarantee that's going to happen in the future, because he's going to now have offers coming into him around, well, if you join us on a free transfer, then we're going to give you X, Y, and Z, and that might be more than Liverpool were willing to pay once they were paying a fee, and it just gives the player options, really. So I guess Liverpool have got to be prepared for that possibility. I still think there's kind of a good relations there with Gahey. I still think he would like to move to Liverpool. So I don't think that's gone, that's gone dead now because it didn't get done at the time. It's still a possibility, albeit January seems not particularly likely at the moment, but we'll see. But there are relations there around kind of that he either comes in January or possibly in the summer. So still some confidence that will maybe get done. But you have to be prepared for all outcomes as well, don't you? And I think Schlotterbeck's just an obvious candidate for someone Liverpool would like. Obviously, come the end of this season, he'll have a year left on his contract. He's only 25 years old, been playing in a top 5 league and got great experience. So there's an awful... And he's a great progressor of the ball as well, which he seems Liverpool are looking for in the centre-halves at the moment. So, he ticks an awful lot of boxes. So it'd be silly for Liverpool not to be looking at him. And it's also worth considering, by the way, that there's a possibility they come to the summer and they need him 2 centre-backs. So, I think if Gahey had come in this summer, then Joe Gomez would have been allowed to leave on loan. So it would have been a 1-in, 1-out situation. So Joe Gomez is allowed to leave next summer. Canate doesn't sign a new contract. You're probably going to need 2 centre-halves, which, makes a lot of sense then if that's Schlotterbeck, if it's Gahey as well on top of that. You could see a situation like that developing. And yeah, there's a lot to like about him as a player, and I know he's someone Liverpool have definitely looked at. But I just think with Schlotterbeck, unlike Gahey, maybe there's a small, little bit of light there that Gahey might get done in January. With Schlotterbeck, he feels a little bit more like, to me, because of the costs involved. Because he's got, he'll be a year out from the end of his contract at the end of the season, but he isn't there at the moment, and so he'd probably take a significant fee. I'd be surprised if he's someone they're looking at for January.
I mean, you touched on there with Schlotterbeck perfectly. He's one of the best ball progressing defenders in Europe. His passes completed is in the top 3% across Europe, top 21 for pass completion, top 1% of centre-backs across the Bundesliga for progressive passes, progressive carries, top 9% successful take-ons. And like you said, Liverpool are interested in that profile of player. And one player who I was interested in for us for a long time was Castello Luqueba for a similar reason. Schlotterbeck's got that about him, but what about his defensive ability? Like, where does he rank for you in terms of what he's capable of doing in a defensive sense for Liverpool going forward if he was to join?
Well, I'll be honest with you, Lewis. I don't count myself as a scout, so I'll say that much. So I'm probably not the best, and I'm not a frequent Bundesliga watcher, but I have seen bits of Schlotterbeck, and the stuff that's always stood out to me is his ability to pass the ball in terms of defensive tests he's faced. I mean, I watched a little bit of him against Northern Ireland in this latest international break, and he, by all accounts, he is a good defender as far as I'm aware. But like I say, I wouldn't count myself as an authority on him. But I think, in terms of, I think Mark Gay's got some defensive weaknesses, by the way. This is a player I've definitely watched a little bit more, but that Liverpool are okay with him having maybe a slight aerial weakness on the basis that he can, he's got that ability in the ball in terms of, now I know Schlotterbeck is bigger in stature and so probably a bit more impressive in terms of his aerial duels, albeit doing it in the Premier League's a bit more difficult. But Liverpool will be looking for that balance of defensive quality and ability to pass the ball. But I think that the main priority, the one kind of facet of the game that they want this next centre-half to have is an ability to pass, because they've lost. It was okay to maybe carry a Canate who, is maybe kind of not as comfortable as some on the ball, some centre-halves, when you had Trent Alexander-Arnold at right back, when you had Robertson, who's an underrated progressor of the ball from left back. But obviously the profiles have changed completely. Kirk is more of a carrier than a passer. You've lost Trent Alexander-Arnold, and Bradley and Frimpong are both probably more carriers than passers as well. I think they just think we desperately need to add more passing profiles at centre-half to kind of account for that and to allow us to progress the ball more easily, because it's been a bit of a struggle at the moment. So I can't, like I say, I can't give a comprehensive view on Schlotterbeck as a player, but I think that main priority seems to be adding passes at the back.
I'm in agreement. And in terms of passing, there is so few players better. I touched on the progressive ones before, but overall, 3% for passes completed, 3% for passes attempted. His total passing distance is in the top 2% of Bundesliga defenders last season. The man is a creative machine. 0.82 key passes per 90 and 10.26 passes into the final third. For a centre-back, those numbers are remarkable. And like you say, I mean, do you think that while that is maybe the emphasis on creative structure coming from the centre-backs, do you think that it's a little bit of a worry that that's the route we've decided to go? Like you said, Kerkez is a carrier of the ball, Frimpong, a similar type of player, but would you not maybe be trying to utilise other players in the squad to find that creative spark more so than the defenders, the centre-backs, so to speak?
Well, they've got to find a way around it before the January transfer window comes around. And if they don't sign someone at the back in January, then they've got to find ways around it, full stop. So they can't be reliant on the market to solve the problems, that's for sure. Whether that's kind of clever rotations with the midfield, you've just got to find ways to progress the ball better than they are at the moment, because it's too easy to push that high press onto them and make it really difficult for them. So I'm hoping they're kind of working on stuff in training to get around that, and maybe a bit of repetitions and time in the training ground will solve it. But I think in terms of whether they're relying on the defenders to do that, I guess you have to be to an extent. I think every team that wants to take the ball from their own defensive third to the final third has got to find ways of doing it safely. And so, when you lose someone like Trent, who was so good at it, and you haven't got a Robertson there anymore as well, you've just got to find someone else in the back four that can, they don't necessarily have to be the ones who are putting it in the final third for you, as maybe Trent was so consistently. But they've got to be able to comfortably get it into your midfielders. And I think Canate at the moment, and maybe, by the way, this will feed into his contract situation, whether Liverpool will say, we're not going to compromise because we don't think you can offer us this. He is struggling to even make those kind of little round the corner passes, or the moment he gets pressed, he looks uncomfortable, doesn't he? And that often leads to kind of a panicked pass, and then Liverpool have not just not been able to get the ball into the kind of middle third of the pitch, they've lost the ball, and then they're suddenly under pressure in terms of potentially conceding a goal. So it's just the way I think they've got around kind of making up for the loss of Trent, making up for the fact that it's not Robertson there, and they want all the carriers on the wide positions, and they want the passers in central positions in that defence. That's the approach that they're going to take now. Whether it'll work as well as what we've seen before, well, the only test of that is whether it is the games that are coming up. But that certainly seems to be the plan.
Yeah, and like you said, we've got to find ways, we've got to find means of which to beat sides. And if Schlotterbeck seems to be the player that Liverpool trust to come in, if it is something that could be agreed, whether Gahey gets agreed or not, like Slot said himself a few weeks ago, I think it was, he was saying, look, I'm happy with the squad of 23, 24, when asked about January signings. And it contradicted slightly the fact that we were trying to sign Gakey and Leone in the summer window. Maybe he's just trying to sort of damage limitation. Maybe he's just trying to say, look, things aren't as bad as they seem. But one way or another, Liverpool do need a defender. And that brings us on nicely to the fact that we're also being linked to left wingers. Now, Yildiz from Juventus, Kenan Yildiz, being linked around with Liverpool at the moment. This is something, I mean, there's in the international break, I mean, Dave, you'll know better than I do, that stories get thrown around left, right, and centre just to sort of keep the wheel turning. Liverpool's desire for a left winger, or lack of desire, either one, is there genuine thought of we should have signed a left winger, we should sign a left winger, or do the club seem happy having Rio Ngamoa and Gakpo as the two options on that left-hand side?
Yeah, I think they seem happy because it was 100% the plan, really. And I think we've got to kind of account for sometimes that they can't just think about this season alone. They can't just think about how do we win the Premier League this season. They've got to think about the kind of long term. And I think when you've got someone like Rio Ngamoa, you just can't afford. If you put Yildiz and Gakpo in front of him, how many minutes is he going to get in a season? And if he doesn't get sufficient minutes in the season, in 3 years' time, is he suddenly good enough to be in your first team? I just don't think he is. You've got someone who can already contribute, by the way, because I think he's put in some good performances so far. And maybe Yildiz is a little bit further along, as he should be, by the way, because Ngamo has just turned 17. But the idea is that, in a couple of years' time, that Ngamo is putting up those Yildiz numbers, and he's doing it in the Premier League already. So, I know it's kind of the short-term pain of like how many times have you looked at it this season and thought it'd be nice to bring on Diaz here, or it'd be nice to start Diaz and bring Gakpo off the bench. But if you want Ngamoa to be what he can be, you've got to play him. You've got to use him, and that might weaken that left-hand side slightly in the short term. But the long term, the upside is having one of the best young players in the world, and I don't think he's a million miles off delivering now. I mean, he's already scored a late winner for Liverpool and was 7 games into the new season, so he's ready to a degree. But he just needs to keep building on those minutes now, and he keeps, and that wouldn't happen if there was someone in front of him. So I take all kind of links to left wingers at the moment with a pinch of salt. To be honest, I think Liverpool are going to persist with what they have, which is Cody Gakpo, Ngamoa, and I do think we'll maybe see a little bit more of Wirtz out there as well from time to time, just to protect Ngamoa, but also because I think it might be a nice position for Wirtz. So, I think it's always been the plan, really, is to leave that pathway open, and I'd be surprised if Liverpool deviate from that.
Yeah, and like you said, it's the benefit is we have such a young attacking talent, and at the start of the season, there were people saying, he's brilliant, but we need to manage his minutes. You look at what happened to Owen; he got burnt out so quickly because he was the only player. Like when Fowler left, Owen got through right in. You then had Heskey as his backup, great player at a period of time, but then it was the likes of Sean Dundee was there. There was Karl-Heinz Riedel. These players that weren't to Owen's standards, so he got burnt out. Now you've got Rio Ngamoa, and you've got these other players around him. You've got Cody Gakpo who's there, like you say, Florian Wirtz, who can drift out onto the left-hand side. What have you made of the Florian Wirtz on the left conundrum? Because obviously he was signed in to be this number 10. He's having to come deeper than pretty much every other midfielder to get the ball. At times he's drifted out right. At times he's been stuck purely on left wing. Do you think that there's maybe a sense of he's someone who's trying to do one particular role, but he's being told to play anywhere but that role, so to speak, and that's not helping his sort of integration process into the squad?
I think what he's probably most struggling with is that kind of you come into the Premier League and it's just packed out every single team pretty much with physical freaks, really. I mean, these are athletes, and so there's just no space to kind of operate in because, the midfielders are too quick, they cover too much ground. When they get there, they'll bully you off the ball as well. It's just superior to the Bundesliga in that sense, in terms of the physical profiles all through the teams, really. And so what you're doing is you're asking someone to come from a less intense league, and it's like, right, we're going to put you in the most packed out, most difficult position on the pitch, which is right in the centre in front of their back four, where there's zero space, and everybody who's trying to win the ball off you is like 6'5" and wide as well. So that's the struggle, and I think while he's going through this acclimatization process, you do just have to push him through it. and just kind of keep playing him until it kind of clicks and he can get there and he realizes how quickly he's got to do things. But I do think there are some games where it really helped to have him off that left-hand side, just to give him more space to operate in. He can drift inside then, and then once he's drifted inside, he's already moving with the ball. He's got pace then, and then he's dribbling at you. That's when you get defenders backtracking. It makes it harder for them. So I just think that's a really nice solution, really, to the problems he's having at the moment. And I think, obviously, we don't want to overplay Ngamoa. I think Gakpo's form's been a bit up and down recently. He's one of many in the squad whose form's not been perfect so far this season. So for me at the moment, Wirtz on the left would be a nice solution really for both the player and the team as a collective, because it would also have a knock-on effect in the midfield you could name, which would be, solid. The relationships are already there as well. So for me, I wouldn't mind seeing him put out there for a few games really. And then when he's kind of adapted and he's eased into it, then you can try him in that number 10 again and see how that goes. But it's been a bit of a baptism of fire for him at the moment, because, as I say, tough league, physicality, and then you think of the games Liverpool have played as well, Newcastle, Arsenal, Crystal Palace. It's been really, really tough ones for him. So, hopefully they maybe try that left wing thing for a little bit and just see if that can ease him in, and then you'll see a bit more of him.
Do you think there's a sense of, because Liverpool have sort of... I realise I'm asking like a leading question, but it's really not. Obviously, Liverpool it's very rare we go through a scenario where we're the ones bringing in the most expensive players and the big money acquisitions. It's such a unique feeling for us as fans. Do you think that there's maybe extra pressure on him, not just because of the price tag, but also because it's such a rarity for us to go out and bring in these big money players, so to speak, that we just expect immediate success in a sense?
Yeah, because I think whenever Liverpool have spent big, and never quite this big before, but when they have spent big, they've been instant hits. I mean, Alisson was just immediately world-class, wasn't he? You look at Van Dijk, he scores against Everton on his debut and was world-class from day one as well. And I think a lot of Liverpool's signings in general over the past 4 or 5 years, and well, further back than that, have kind of, the ones that have been successes have hit the ground running. I think Salah, Mane, another good couple of examples. The problem that you've got at the moment, and this is not just true for Wirtz, it's also true for Isak, Kerkez, the ones who are coming into the team straight away, is that they're in a disjointed team. And so it's very hard to, if you're kind of Salah coming into that team, you're the big change that happens that summer pretty much, aren't you? And you've already got Mane settled there, Firmino's already there. So you're almost like the final piece of the puzzle in that front three, and their relationships are already there and you just fit in perfectly. Whereas Wirtz, you're dropping him in, and what's in front of him is a new player in Ekitike or a new player in Isak. You've got Gakpo who's kind of out of form because he doesn't have a relationship with his left back at the moment. And, all these kind of issues are going on throughout the team, really. So, you don't have Salah in his best form because he's missing the progressor behind him in Trent Alexander-Arnold. And that, getting the ball into the final third is proving a problem because the relationships deeper in the team are not quite there. So, that's a major kind of problem for them, really, is that they're not the final piece of the puzzle. They're all being thrown together into this really disjointed team. So you just hope that the solution to that is a little bit of time, and that the more these all play together, that it will settle down and we'll start to see the best of them, hopefully starting after this international break. But there is that pressure because of the price tag, and you just really hope that that's not going to crush them, and that we will start to see the best of them now.
I mean, it's a process at the end of the day. We saw when Klopp signed Fabinho, Robertson, they were rested a few games, given like a sort of bedding in period before being thrown in. And there's a really interesting question here, actually, from John Summers, which says, "Hi guys, do you think we sign a quality DM next summer to let Ryan play further forward?" Now, we touched on it briefly earlier with the Gravenberch thing, and by viewing on it, you'd have to think that next summer would have to be the season where we do maybe look at bringing in someone a little bit deeper. Endo's not going to be around forever. Bajcetic hasn't come back from this injury. He's still recovering. He's still got a bedding in period for that. Do you think that is a good point, that maybe we could see a world where we bring in someone that bit deeper, and maybe Gravenberch's another player that we can add a little bit further forward to assist the likes of Wirtz, Szoboszlai, maybe McAllister, etc.?
I think it would require a big exit in midfield, because for me, I think with the Endo situation, he's essentially the backup number 6 at the moment. I think Trainioni's being kind of blooded for that. I think he's being readied for that role, really. And I think someone like him with his profile, his qualities, again, like Ngamoa, you want to leave that pathway open. He's a very, very, very good young player training, and I think he's going to play a lot of games for Liverpool. So you want to leave that pathway open for him. But he's also, he kind of would be a nice profile to back up Gravenberch. They've got kind of similar qualities. So I would really like to see him take on Endo's role from next season if Endo were to leave. Now, in terms of kind of the more high-profile additions, I know talk about Wharton, talk about Baleba, and you hear a lot about those. I think, like I say, for one of those to happen, you'd have to have a big exit. Now, that could be, we hear about McAllister and Real Madrid a lot, don't we? Mm-hmm. It would have to be something like that, I think, to maybe open that up. And, maybe that's a consideration for Liverpool. If McAllister does move on, okay, maybe we can use Gravenberch further forward. We can get an out-and-out six. Ideally, would sign someone who's a number 6 now and add them to the current rotation. I just don't see how that kind of works itself out, really, because they're just so stacked in terms of numbers there and quality numbers as well. Players who are going to expect to play a lot of games in the season. It's really hard to imagine. You say to Baleba, okay, come in and you can play 25 games a season because this other guy wants the other 25. It's just never going to really work, is it? So, I struggle to see that without a headline departure, really. And maybe that will happen. But otherwise, it's tough to see that.
Yeah, and look, departures have been a big thing. And Nick's Buzz says, I think Harvey's a player we miss. He always creates something as a sub. And maybe we are sort of lacking that impact midfielders who can come on. Obviously, up front, we've had Ekitike come on as a sub and he's made impacts. Chiesa has done the same thing and Gamoa. But maybe we do miss that kind of Harvey Elliott player in midfield who can come on and is just a bit more direct, so to speak, a bit more aggressive. Do you think that is something that we do need to think about?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm a big Harvey Elliott fan, and I think he always did add something in the final third, didn't he, when he came in as a substitute? And so that was a big weapon for Liverpool last season, and definitely the season before, where he was excellent in that role. He really did turn a lot of games. So it is something they missed. But the idea is that they're not going to miss him at number 10 because they're going to have Florian Wirtz, and when he hits the ground, he starts really kind of motoring, then you're not going to be thinking, oh, Liverpool are a little bit short in this attacking midfield position. And when you get a Florian Wirtz who's flying and playing at his best, Harvey Elliott's very, very rarely going to touch the pitch in that situation. So that's the plan. So, hopefully we get to the end of the season and you don't think they miss Harvey too much, but they definitely do at the moment, because there's so many games you've watched where you think Wirtz isn't offering much. I would absolutely be happy to bring Harvey Elliott in. But the thinking with signing Wirtz is that his ceiling is much higher, and so you hope to start seeing proof of that in the games that are coming up.
And I mean, lastly, we'll